Railways of Binevenagh. Audio descriptive text. This video is an audio description of the Railways of Binevenagh guide. The guide sets out some key information about the railways and their history in the Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty. It contains 44 pages with a mixture of maps, text and photographs. The recording was produced by Direct Access on behalf of Causeway Coast and Glens Heritage Trust. The Trust is a charity devoted to protecting and enhancing the unique heritage of the Causeway Coast and Glens area. My name is Stephen O'Hara. This recording was done on the 18th of March 2021. Contents. 1. Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty. 2. Introduction. 3. The rise of the railways in Ireland. 4. The Londonderry and Coleraine Railway Company. 5. The impact of the new railways. 6. Built heritage. 7. Natural heritage of Binevenagh. 8. The Railways of Binevenagh in the 20th century. 9. Binevenagh and Coastal Lowlands Landscape Partnership Scheme. 10. Thank you. 11. Visitor information and our funders. 1. Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty. The Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty was designated in 2006 by virtue of its outstanding natural beauty and its rich and diverse natural, built and cultural heritage. The Binevenagh area is located in the northwest of Northern Ireland, running from the shores of Lough Foyle and the Roe estuary to the small village of Castlerock and on to the outskirts of Coleraine. The area of outstanding natural beauty boasts some of the finest beaches and dune systems in Ireland, which rise steeply to Binevenagh Mountain. From the mountain at Gortmore Viewpoint, there are spectacular panoramic views of Magilligan Point and the Inishowen Peninsula in County Donegal, with the Scottish Isles of Islay and Jura in the distance. The famous Mussenden Temple and Downhill Estate is also located within the area of outstanding natural beauty, as is the Martello Tower at Magilligan, exemplifying the area's rich defence heritage. The Binevenagh landscape is home to special habitats which support a range of flora and fauna. The importance of these habitats is reflected in designations including special areas of conservation and areas of special scientific interest. Such designations help to protect and conserve the area of outstanding natural beauty's special biodiversity. Two. Introduction. Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty is home to what is widely considered one of the best railway journeys in the world. The tracks and tunnels of the Londonderry to Coleraine Railway have shaped this outstanding landscape, offering access to its stunning views, wildlife, amenities and local communities from the mid-19th century. The story of the railways is a fascinating chapter in the history of Ulster's north coast, a product of the expansion of industry and innovation in the early 19th century. The construction of the railways includes many interesting and eccentric events which have become the stuff of local legend, while the impact of the railways themselves has been significant. This video explores Binevenagh's railways and how they shaped the landscape, helped us keep time, grew early tourism, and even contributed to the war efforts of the 20th century. Memories and stories of local people show what the railway has meant to generations of residents and visitors. We will also learn more about the rich landscape, wildlife and habitats which can be seen along the Londonderry to Coleraine line. 3. The rise of the railways in Ireland. It is unclear when the first primitive railways or tramways were constructed. Medieval German woodcuts show trucks and carts run on wooden rails were used in early mines, while evidence shows primitive tramways occasionally being used for mining in England as early as the 16th century. However, such examples are few and far between. It took an industrial revolution for the birth of the railways we see today. Before the 18th century, Ireland's economy relied on agriculture, handicrafts, fishing and small-scale cottage industries producing textiles, dairy and other items for market. By the 1720s, things were beginning to change. Early industrial innovations were being pioneered on Ireland's north coast by landowner and entrepreneur Hugh Boyd of Ballycastle. Boyd transformed Ballycastle from a small fishing port and market village into arguably the most important centre of early industry in Ireland. Boyd expanded Ballycastle's harbour, built a glasshouse, salt works, increased manufacturing and established a colliery and other mines outside the town. He also gave Ireland its first documented railway. Around 1740, Boyd constructed a tramway consisting of simple wooden carts running on wooden rails to transport stone from nearby quarries to build a new harbour. Later, he constructed an additional tramway to transport coal from Boyd's mines along the coast for shipping to Belfast and Dublin. These tramways and the growth of Boyd's industries in Ballycastle were crucial in helping to fuel early Irish industry, paving the way for the rapid change to come. In 1804, Robert Trevithick invented the first working steam locomotive, which led to the development of the world's first modern railway network. Trevithick's work was built on by George Stephenson, whose locomotive powered the first public railway to utilise steam traction in 1825. The guide contains an illustration of a four-wheeled engine with funnel to the front, pulling several four-wheeled open-topped wagons with passengers. The first modern railway powered by a steam locomotive was the Stockton to Darlington Railway. It opened in northeast England in 1825 and carried both freight and passengers. Returning to the main text. The new railways revolutionised transport and travel. People could now travel much faster than ever before. Previously, travel was via roads and a growing canal network, but this was often long, tedious and expensive. The capacity to move large numbers of goods and people over long distances at speed meant the new railways quickly expanded, leading to the decline of canals as a mode of transport. The guide contains a map showing the location of two small canals constructed in 1820 in the Binevenagh area. The first was a 2-mile-long cut connecting Ballykelly to Lough Foyle. The second canal at Broharras was intended to connect Limavady to Lough Foyle in a bid to increase the town's trade. However, in a scenario repeated across the UK and Ireland, the arrival of the railway removed the need for canals and they fell into disuse. Returning to the main text, railway mania quickly spread and new railways popped up across Great Britain, Ireland and around the globe in the decades following the opening of Stephenson's Stockton to Darlington line. Thousands of miles of railway lines were constructed and many railway companies emerged as people realised just how lucrative the new industry could be. The earliest proposal for an Irish railway was for a line between Belfast and Dublin as early as 1825, but this did not materialise. The first Irish railway opened in Dublin in 1834. The Dublin to Kingstown Railway transported goods and people from Kingstown Port into Ireland's capital. The guide contains a black and white portrait photo of William Dargan, born in 1799 and died in 1867. Called the father of Ireland's railways, William built over 800 miles of railway across Ireland. He helped to design the island's first modern railway, the Dublin to Kingstown, and built the lines between Belfast and Portrush. Dargan also undertook significant public works, including the Ulster Canal and Belfast's Queen's Island. In 1836, royal assent was granted for a railway between Belfast and Lisburn, the second to be built in Ireland. Opening in May 1839, the Ulster Railway carried 3,000 passengers on its first day and was a great novelty for the people of the area. Ulster's railway network continued to expand. New railway companies were founded and competed to build lines to connect the region. Four, the Londonderry and Coleraine Railway Company. By the 1840s, Derry Londonderry was a thriving port town with over 20,000 residents and was close to the neighbouring hubs of Limavady and Coleraine. The area boasted fertile farmland with strong linen and agricultural industries, and so was seen as holding great potential for a new railway. From the time of the plantation, Derry Londonderry held strong connections with the City of London. Hence, in 1844, proposals for two new railways were raised in the city. One line was to run to Enniskillen via Strabane and Omagh. The other proposed scheme would prove to be far more ambitious. Plans were made for a railway line to connect Derry Londonderry to Limavady and Coleraine, improving transport links for trade and travel. However, the railway itself was only part of a much grander scheme. An extensive land reclamation project would also be included. The new railway line was to run atop a 15-mile-long embankment from Coolkira, cutting across the northeastern corner of Lough Foyle to McGilligan Point. The embankment's construction was intended to reclaim around 20,000 acres of land, which would be sold to finance the new railway. Despite some scepticism, the Londonderry and Coleraine Railway Company, often abbreviated to the L&C, received parliamentary approval on the 4th of August 1845 and successfully raised £500,000 for the project. This gave the go-ahead for the construction of the embankment and some 30 miles of railway between Coleraine and Derry Londonderry, with a branch line to Limavady. The guide contains a map of the stations between Waterside and Derry Londonderry. The stations within the Binevenagh Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty are highlighted. These are Bellarina, McGilligan, Umbra, Downhill Tunnels and Castle Rock. Work begins on the new railway. Construction commenced almost immediately after the L&C's plans were approved. Famous railway engineer Robert Stevenson, the son of George Stevenson, and architect Charles Lanyon were commissioned to undertake initial surveys for construction of the Great Embankment and two tunnels at Downhill. In 1845, contractors began the land reclamation work at Coolkira. Stone, quarried in Moville, Donegal, was ferried across Lough Foyle for the new embankment. The guide has a photo of Queen's University Belfast, one of Sir Charles Lanyon's projects. The caption states, "He was born in 1813 and died in 1889. Charles was an Englishman who moved to County Antrim as county surveyor in 1836, where he helped to oversee the construction of the Antrim Coast Road. A talented architect and civil engineer, Lanyon was involved in many prominent projects over his long career, including Crumlin Road Courthouse and Portrush Town Hall. Belfast Central Station has recently been renamed Lanyon Place in his honour. Returning to the main text. By June 1846, around 4,000 acres of land had been reclaimed and quickly sold and put to tillage. The construction of the downhill tunnels was also underway by this time. Reports claim that the L&C were forced to bring in several hundred Englishmen to work on the construction, as no local navvies could be found with the required expertise. The guide has an illustration of two men with shovels, known as navvies. An abbreviation of navigator, navvy is a general term used for those who worked on the construction of canals and later railways across the UK and Ireland. At the peak of railway mania in the 1840s, around 250,000 navvies were employed to work on UK railways. Around a third of these are thought to have been Irish labourers. Returning to the main text. Traditional tunnelling and mining techniques were used to excavate the tunnels, alongside the use of explosives to remove large quantities of rock. The first blasting at Downhill occurred in November 1845. Lady Bruce, wife of landowner Sir Henry Hervey Bruce, lit the fuse for the explosion and hosted a celebration at Downhill Castle. On the 6th of June 1846, almost 12,000 people watched as the downhill cliffs were once again blasted for the creation of the tunnels. An estimated 22,000 tons of rock were dislodged from Downhill's cliff face during the Great Blast, while spectators watched and cheered from the shore and on pleasure boats out to sea. A banquet with 500 guests was then held inside one of the partially excavated tunnels, in which 18 ornate chandeliers were hung from the basalt rock ceiling. The guide contains an extract from an article, "The Great Blast at Downhill," in the Railway Times, 27th of June 1846. An onlooker describes the Great Blast at Downhill. Saturday, June the 6th, was the day appointed for this tremendous explosion. Some mercantile houses in this city suspended business to allow all in their employment a holiday, and vast numbers both in town and from the country eagerly availed themselves of the opportunity to witness. Thousands kept moving in groups to and fro upon the sand, or were seen to climb the steep ascent of Downhill or to visit the tunnels. An object of considerable interest was the mine in which was deposited the elements of destructive power. Mr. Hemming, the engineer, was most persevering in his exertions to prevent the possibility of accident or danger. At 10 minutes after 2 o'clock, with his own hands, he took down the first flag, when 2 cannon shots were fired. Mr. Hemming then took down the second signal flag, and 1 gun was fired 10 minutes before the explosion. At this moment, the general interest became painfully intense. The breath was retained, and every eye was strained in gazing upon the cliff. 20 minutes to 4 o'clock, a low, muffled, booming noise is heard, and simultaneously the whole front of the cliff was seen to give a general heaving outwards and slightly upwards, fell with a rumbling crash into 1,000 fragments, and a cloud of dust ascended into the air. A spontaneous cheer burst from the assembled multitude, and a rush was made to the scene of destruction. Returning to the main text. Delays and difficulties. Despite initial progress, the railway's construction was soon fraught with difficulties leading to delays. Early issues included the miners working on the downhill tunnels attempting to unionise, which was illegal in this period. The unlucky miners were brought before Coleraine Court for their infraction. Meanwhile, the sheer scale of the planned project was also proving troublesome. By 1847, a hard winter and issues with the supply of materials and locomotives meant progress on the Great Embankment was slow and costs were increasing. Therefore, the decision was taken to scale down the plans. The railway would now follow the existing shore of Lough Foyle more closely, rather than running almost entirely along the proposed embankment. In July 1847, the Western Tunnel at Downhill was completed, making it the first railway tunnel in Ireland ready for use. Unfortunately, it would be 6 long years before any train would travel through it. Despite revisions, the demands of simultaneously constructing a large land reclamation and a railway continued to put strain on the L&C and its engineers. This led to yet more delays, disagreements and spiralling costs. In 1850 an Act of Parliament had to be secured to grant a 5-year extension to the project, while the original contractors were replaced in 1851. By 1852 the L&C were in such financial difficulties that the company was dissolved, reincorporated, and further capital had to be raised to complete the project. The guide contains a black and white photo of a single-track railway line going over a level crossing with a station on the right-hand side after the crossing. In 1853 the L&C began construction of a branch line at Magilligan, which is thought to have opened in early 1855. Evidence suggests that this branch was actually a horse-drawn tramway, with horses pulling cars along a 4.5-mile track from Magilligan Station to Magilligan Point. The L&C intended for this branch to connect their main railway to the ferry service, which crossed Lough Foyle to Donegal. However, it seems to have closed after only a few months, making this possibly the shortest-lived branch line in history. Jim Hunter, Hervey Heritage Group, is quoted as saying, "In the early 60s I interviewed Henry Jameson, approaching 100 years of age, about his young days. He told me that his father, who lived in Eglinton, had worked on the Derry to Coleraine Railway, and had walked to work, some 10 miles each way, every morning. He continued to work on the track as it passed through Eglinton, Ballykelly, and on to Limavady Junction. He was prepared to walk long distances as work was scarce, and 5 shillings a week helped to keep his family alive in difficult times during the famine and its aftermath." The new railway opens, and the end of the L&C. By late 1852 the end was finally in sight. The new railway was partially opened, with the first passenger train running between Derry Londonderry and Limavady on the 29th of December 1852. Then a final push was made to complete the railway from the Broharris Junction, which was later renamed as Limavady Junction, to Coleraine. A local brickyard in Ardiclave employed 150 local men to make the bricks to line the downhill tunnels, and the final construction work was eventually concluded. On the 18th of July 1853, the Broharris to Coleraine section opened to all traffic. The Derry Londonderry to Coleraine Railway was finally complete, 8 long years after the project had begun. In all, it had cost a staggering £9,500 per mile. This is around £760,000 per mile in today's money. Such huge costs, coupled with the onset of a financial depression in the 1850s, meant that the L&C struggled, despite the railway opening. In 1860, the workings of the L&C were taken over by the expanding Belfast and Ballymena Railway Company via lease and reformed into the Belfast and Northern Counties Railway, abbreviated to BNCR. The BNCR would go on to have a virtual monopoly on all rail traffic in the counties of Londonderry and Antrim. By 1871, the L&C Railway Company ceased to exist. Five. The impact of the new railways. The railway had a significant impact on its surrounding communities and on the landscape which would later be designated as Binevenagh Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. The construction of the line itself offered employment during the Great Famine of the 1840s to early 1850s and provided increased opportunities for travel, communications, recreation and trade. The general social and cultural impact of the railways cannot be underestimated. Changing times. The strict timekeeping required for running an efficient railway network and the introduction of timetables actually helped standardize time. Before, Each village, town and city could keep their own local time, which could differ by several minutes. However, railways required accurate signalling and exact timings, so a few minutes could make all the difference. By the later 19th century, Greenwich Mean Time, often abbreviated to GMT, was applied across Great Britain with the Time Act of 1880. Initially, Ireland had its own time zone, Dublin Mean Time, 25 minutes behind the rest of the UK, but this was later changed to GMT in 1916. The guide contains a black and white photo of a steam engine behind a group of carriages. Josephine Key is quoted as saying, "My father, Joseph Cairns, was employed by the railway for 46 years from the 1940s. He cycled from Coleraine to Londonderry to start his shift as a platform sweeper, then fireman, before eventually becoming a train driver. This photo shows my father driving a steam train in the early 50s. Over his long career, my father enjoyed the company of his work colleagues and the beautiful landscape and views along the shoreline. He retired in the early 90s after a terrible accident on the train, but he always said he loved his job on the railway and was lucky to have it." The differences in first, second and third class. In previous centuries, ideals of propriety and status meant that class distinctions were more pervasive in society than they are today. Therefore, from the beginning, train cars or carriages were built to different standards, which reflected such distinctions. A premium was charged for more luxurious first-class travel for the wealthy. This was accompanied by second class for those of moderate means, while third class was reserved for the poor and working classes. Initially, conditions in third class were incredibly uncomfortable, with passengers lumped together on hard benches and little concern over safety. However, over time conditions improved. By the later 19th century, it was standard to offer closed carriages, improved lighting and more comfortable seating. These improvements meant that it became more common for better-offs to travel third class, especially over long journeys. Thus, railways provided one of the few opportunities for people of different classes to interact, sitting side by side as railway passengers. Alex Esdale, former UTA and NI Railways area manager, is quoted as saying, "The railway was never without light-hearted moments. There was Tommy McConaughey, the foreman at Limavady Junction, who, when parcels were collected, just signed the delivery book on behalf of the owner. We had auditors who arrived unannounced to check the books, and one asked Tommy why all the signatures were in the same handwriting. Tommy just replied, 'Sir, you see, we all went to Carrowmeno School, just down the road.' I also remember a station master clerk called Dan Bradley, who was travelling home on the 5:30 from Londonderry, so I joined him in the second-class compartment, for which he had a pass. However, a very officious ticket inspector saw my ticket, which was only a third, and asked me to leave." Early tourism on Ulster's coast. The advent of the railways had a huge impact on Ireland's economy and industry. As early as the 1850s, the L&C recognised the tourism potential of their new railway, given its proximity to the Giant's Causeway. Special fares were provided to Coleraine and on to Portrush, where passengers could arrange transport to the Causeway and other tourist attractions. The guide contains a black and white photo of three ladies sitting at the wishing chair Giant's Causeway. The caption states, "The Giant's Causeway has been a popular tourist attraction for over 200 years. The first Causeway Hotel was built in 1836, and Kane's Royal Hotel was built in the 1860s. Both hotels had tour guides associated with them, while locals often sold souvenirs to tourists at the stones. Access to the north coast was boosted by the main line railway to Portrush in the 1850s. In 1887, the world's first hydroelectric tramway was extended to the Causeway. It first opened in 1883, transporting passengers from Portrush to Bushmills. The tramway closed in 1949. Returning to the main text. Later, the BNCR also recognised that encouraging the growth of Ulster's tourism could increase their passengers and profits, investing heavily in attracting visitors to both the Antrim and North Coasts. BNCR offered cheap excursions and day trips, and even undertook large-scale tourism projects. The most famous of these projects was the construction of the Gobbins Cliff Path at Island Magee in 1902, overseen by BNCR Chief Engineer Barclay Dean Wise. His work at Glenariff alongside his BNCR colleague Edward John Cotton was also impressive. In 1886, the BNCR opened a narrow-gauge railway running from Ballymena to Parkmore with the intention of profiting from tourism in the Antrim Glens. The company leased land at Glenariff, close to Parkmore, and together Dean Wise and Cotton turned this area into a thriving tourist attraction, laying out rustic walks, paths, bridges, and building a tea room for visitors. Many such attractions built by the BNCR are still enjoyed by visitors today. The railway's efforts to encourage the growth of tourism were largely successful. For the first time, people from all walks of life had the ability to affordably travel faster, further afield, and to enjoy day trips and excursions. This encouraged the growth of seaside resorts along the north coast and in Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty, Portstewart and Portrush. Portstewart, which lies east of the area of outstanding natural beauty's boundary, quickly became a very popular destination with tourists and holidaymakers, as it remains to the present day. Portstewart was serviced by a small stop on the Coleraine to Portrush line, on the outskirts of the town. Local landowner John Cromie had prevented a central Portstewart station being built in the 1850s, as he feared the railway would ruin the town's character. This stop, Portstewart Station, was constructed across from Cromie's estate in retaliation for his objections. From 1882, visitors could avail of a tramway connecting Portstewart Station to the town centre. This tramway ceased operations in 1926. Portstewart Station closed in 1988. Portrush also experienced a significant transformation due to the railway, evolving from a modest fishing village in the early 19th century to an expansive seaside resort with numerous hotels and entertainments. Famous BNCR engineer Barclay Dean Wise oversaw substantial improvements in the town in the 1890s, expanding Portrush Station and renovating the Northern Counties Hotel. Mike Jones, Castle Rock Community Association, is quoted as saying, "In 1972, I was required to move my family to the Coleraine area. I fell for the downhill domain, and Hazlitt and Castle Rock Station allowed me to commute to Coleraine. Once moved to Castle Rock, I soon fell in with a loyal group of train travellers such as Harry Taylor, W.T. Ewing and Peter Craddock. But it was far from a smooth ride in the 70s and 80s. Disruptions due to political actions were a daily occurrence, sometimes leading to frustrations. One notable train driver often exceeded the speed limit on the stretch from Castle Rock to Coleraine, triggering an automatic engine shutdown and further delay. Thankfully, today's passengers on this, Michael Palin's favourite stretch of picturesque line, enjoy an excellent service. The guide contains a colour photo of Castle Rock Station with twin tracks. A steam train with two carriages is pulling into the station with the local signal box on the right. Castle Rock. The small seaside village of Castle Rock is situated within Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty, close to Downhill's dramatic tunnels and 5 miles west of Coleraine. The village was created by the arrival of the L&C Railway in 1853. The Hervey Bruce family of Downhill, the local landowners, wanted railway stops close to Downhill for their own convenience. The L&C agreed and saw an opportunity to create a holiday resort in the area now known as Castle Rock. The railway company incentivised investors to build holiday villas at Castle Rock by offering free first-class travel for 10 years for anyone who built one. The scheme was later continued by the BNCR from 1860. With its long beach and proximity to the spectacular landscapes of Downhill and Binevenagh, Castle Rock was hugely attractive for tourists, holiday makers and investors. Many villas were built alongside other amenities, creating the village seen today. Castle Rock remains a popular destination in the summer months, enjoyed by locals and visitors alike. Six, built heritage. The guide contains a black and white photo of Londonderry waterside station at the start of this chapter. The railway undoubtedly helped to shape the landscape of Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty and beyond. The land reclamation and embankment, the railway tracks and tunnels, and the built heritage of the railway's many stations can all still be seen across the landscape today. They have become familiar features unique to the character of Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty and the surrounding area. Londonderry waterside station. Opening in 1852, the station was later rebuilt 1873 to 1875 and remained in operation until February 1980, when it was forced to close following 2 bomb attacks in the 1970s. The station was replaced by a modern station with a new platform and reduced capacity. In 2016, TransLink announced that the station would be restored and reopened as a transport hub for the city. Waterside opened once again for rail traffic on the 21st of October 2019 and is now the only railway terminus in the city. Londonderry to Limavady. In 1853, stations at Willsborough, which later became Eglinton, Carrahue, Ballykelly and Brighter, were opened. Further stations at Culmore in 1854 and Fawnvale in 1855 to 59 followed later. The Ballykelly station was removed with the construction of an aerodrome in the 1940s, and the other stations are now also closed. Broharris Junction, now known as Limavady Junction, opened in 1852. The junction station at Broharris had no platform. Mainline trains proceeded through this junction on the branch line to Limavady before reversing and proceeding onwards to Coleraine from 1853. This station is now closed. The guide contains a black and white photo of the junction with 2 lines into the station and a 3rd line veering off to the right. 3 semaphore signal gantries are visible, all in the stop position. Limavady Station. The station at Limavady, or Newtown Limavady as it was then known, opened in 1852. The town was served by a 4-mile long branch line which extended from the Broharris Junction. When Limavady Station first opened, the platform was several inches higher than the bottom of the train's carriages, meaning that the dignitaries on board had to disembark straight onto the track. Limavady Station remained in operation until 1955. The guide contains a black and white photo of 1 platform. There are 3 lines with 3 open wagons and 2 closed goods vans on the track furthest from the station. Bellarina to Coleraine. After the final section of the railway opened in 1853, there were stations at Bellarina, McGilligan, Downhill and Castle Rock. There is some evidence of a station at Umbra, now closed. At Magilligan, the station house was built by John Lanyon and remained in use until the 1970s. Downhill Station closed in 1973. Coleraine Waterside Station. The original Coleraine terminus for the L&C Railway was located on the western bank of the River Bann, in the vicinity of what is now called Waterside. The River Bann was a major obstacle for rail-through traffic in Coleraine, and initially there was a gap between Colerane's Waterside and Northbrook stations. Passengers were required to disembark and cross the river by horse car. Northbrook Station was built in 1855 for the new Ballymena, Ballymoney, Coleraine and Portrush Junction Railway, which was incorporated into the BNCR in 1861. Colerane's Waterside Station closed around 1860, while the Northbrook Station remains in use as the town's only railway terminus. The guide contains a black and white photo of the entrance to Northbrook Station in the late 1800s, with several horse-drawn carts. Colerane's Railway Bridge. The first railway bridge in Coleraine did not open until November 1860, and its construction was overseen by William Dargan. The bridge allowed the L&C Railway to continue directly to Colerane's Northbrook Station, bypassing the town's Waterside Station, which was rendered obsolete. Initially, Coleraine residents were critical of the new bridge, complaining that it might spoil their view of the river and cause difficulties for shipping. The bridge was constructed from timber and iron, with a revolving opening span to allow ships to pass. It remained in operation until 1924, when it was replaced by the current bridge, a steel construction famed for its efficient bascule span mechanism. This mechanism allows the bridge to be raised up vertically, allowing ships to pass, making for a dramatic sight. The guide contains a black and white photo of Colerane's original railway bridge crossing the River Bann. Wooden structure can be seen holding up the railway track. The sepia photo of the current railway bridge at the same location shows a steam train pulling 3 carriages and what appears to be a goods van. Seven. Natural Heritage of Binevenagh. The outstanding natural beauty and important wildlife of Binevenagh Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty have been viewed and enjoyed by passengers on the Londonderry to Coleraine line for generations. What can you spot on your journey? Binevenagh is home to a wide range of special habitats and species. At the heart of the area of outstanding natural beauty is Binevenagh Mountain, with its scree slopes, forestry plantations, woodland, special grasslands, heath and bog. Meanwhile, important dune systems and beaches stretch from the River Roe estuary to the west, along the shores of Lough Foyle and on to the coastal village of Portstewart in the east. Such habitats support a rich variety of flora and fauna and have been afforded special protections due to their environmental importance. These include 10 areas of special scientific interest, 1 special protection area, 4 special areas of conservation, 1 Ramsar site, 5 national nature reserves. The guide contains a series of photographs of different animals and plants that can be seen in the area. These include fox, orange with a grey chest; otter, brown with black tail; common lizard. These can often be found in Binevenagh's sand dunes. They are Northern Ireland's only native reptile species. Kittiwake, white bird with grey wings; oystercatcher, bird with white chest, black wings and head. The oystercatcher has a long beak in a bright orange colour. Purple saxifrage is one of Northern Ireland's rarest plants, confined entirely to the high mountain cliffs of Binevenagh. The leaves are small, rounded, scale-like, opposite in 4 rows with ciliated margins. The flowers are solitary on short stalks with purple or lilac petals. Other rare plants include mountain avens and moss campion, not pictured. Sea campion contains linear grey-green leaves with white flowers and deeply notched petals. Marsh orchids have long stalks with compact purple flowers at the end. Marsh fritillary butterfly. Once common across the UK and Ireland, this species is now under threat. Numbers have drastically declined in recent decades, and this butterfly is now considered a priority species requiring urgent conservation action. The photo in the guide illustrates a black, yellow and orange butterfly. Fulmar, white bird with a grey and yellow beak. Curlew, mainly greyish-brown with a white back, greyish-blue legs and a very long curved bill. The scarce crimson and gold moth is one of the UK's rarest moths, found only in the dune systems of Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty and on the Isle of Man. Eyebright are white flowering plants with yellow petals. Irish hare, in light brown with long ears rising above its head. The peregrine falcon has a blue-grey back, barred white underparts and a black head. Reaching speeds of up to 180 km per hour, these birds hunt prey at speed and on the wing from great distances. With a recovering population, they often nest along sea cliffs and can now be spotted across the UK and Ireland. These birds remain protected species at risk of persecution. Eider duck with its black and white plumage and green nape combined with a large wedge-shaped bill. Bumblebee. The picture illustrates a bee on a yellow flower. The Railways of Binevenagh in the 20th century. The Northern Counties Committee and World War I. From July 1903, BNCR railways were now managed by the Northern Counties Committee, abbreviated to NCC, a management committee of the Midland Railway of England. This period, from 1900 to the end of the First World War, is often referred to as the Golden Age of rail travel. At this time, the rail network dominated the land transport of people and goods, as combustion engine vehicles, early cars and lorries were few and far between. After the outbreak of war in 1914, the NCC and its railways played an important role, transporting troops and vital supplies. Many of the NCC's employees enlisted in the Great War and some did not return. On Thursday, the 24th of November 1921, the NCC unveiled a memorial commemorating their railway workers who died during World War I. This memorial, a large obelisk structure, was erected in the concourse of York Road Railway Station, Belfast. The guide contains a black and white photo of a large group surrounding the memorial. The guide also lists the names of NCC employees who died during World War I. Between the wars. After 1918, the fortunes of the railway declined. The war had led to rapid advancements in the development of combustion engine vehicles. A new transport revolution, to rival even that of the railways, was in progress. 1923 saw the railway companies further amalgamated, and the NCC now fell under the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, LMS. Around the same time, the first bus services began. The new buses provided yet more competition for the railways, which would see a steady decline in the 1920s and 30s. The Second World War. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 gave the railways a second wind. Binevenagh's railway line was arguably the most important railway in Northern Ireland during the war effort of the 1940s. It served the newly constructed RAF aerodromes at Limavady, Ballykelly, Eglinton, Maydown and the important naval base at Derry, Londonderry. This area along the shores of Lough Foyle was particularly suited to housing airfields because of its even and flat landscape, partly thanks to the land reclamations of the L&C Railway Company in the 1840s. The guide contains a black and white photo of a train crossing the airfield at Ballykelly with a Liberator plane stationary on the runway in 1944. During the war, the communities of Binevenagh Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty would have seen thousands of servicemen from across the UK and further afield brought in on the railway, travelling to the aerodromes and training stations in the area. For instance, in 1942 the first US troops to land in Europe disembarked in Belfast and were sent via 7 special trains to Antrim and Derry Londonderry, making the NCC the first railway in Europe to carry American forces during World War II. Alex Esdale, the former UTA and NI Railways area manager, is quoted as saying, "I remember the arrival of the American troops, arriving at Port Stewart in the middle of the night by special train from Belfast, going to the Cromore camp across the road. During their free time they travelled to Portrush or Coleraine for dances, and some visited our house, bringing some goodies and candy. Although I was young, I can remember hearing the German planes passing over after the bombing of Belfast, and probably to Londonderry, which was also bombed. My father was in the Royal Victoria Hospital, and I remember that York Street was still smouldering when my mother and I were travelling to visit him." In 1943, the RAF airfield at Ballykelly was extended to land larger aircraft for the Battle of the Atlantic. The longer runway now cut across the railway line between Ballykelly Station and Limavady Junction. This led to a unique arrangement between the NCC and the RAF. The airbase's control tower was linked to the railway's signal box, ensuring that no planes attempted to take off or land as trains were approaching. The guide contains a black and white photo of passengers in front of an RAF Shackleton and a train at Ballykelly in October 1970. The novelty of a train crossing an airfield lived on after the war. Post-war to the present day. After the end of the Second World War, the railways continued to struggle, and a post-war reorganisation saw the NCC nationalised and absorbed by the new Ulster Transport Authority, or UTA, in 1948. The UTA included bus services and went on to close many railway lines across Northern Ireland. It was at this time that many of the Derry, Londonderry to Coleraine Railways intermediate stations were closed, as was its branch line to Limavady. The UTA was replaced by NI Railways in 1968, and then reformed into Translink, incorporating Northern Ireland Railways, Citybus, Metro and Ulsterbus in the 1990s. Translink continues to operate Northern Ireland's railways today. Binevenagh's railway largely survived the upheavals of the 20th century, and recent years has seen a boost to railway traffic across Northern Ireland. The rise of commuter travel and an increased focus on using public transport have given our railways a renewed purpose and have highlighted their importance. The Derry, Londonderry to Coleraine line has also received renewed appreciation. In 2010, the outstanding beauty of the Binevenagh area was celebrated by the BBC's Great British Railway Journeys. Host Michael Palin described the line as one of the most beautiful railway journeys in the world. Nine. Binevenagh and Coastal Lowlands Landscape Partnership Scheme. A new National Lottery Heritage Fund Landscape Partnership Scheme will see the delivery of many projects to celebrate and protect the natural, built and cultural heritage of an area which includes much of the Binevenagh Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. On the 19th of March 2020, the Binevenagh and Coastal Lowlands Landscape Partnership announced that they had secured £3.4 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and other funders to deliver an extensive 5-year programme. This will assist in the ongoing revitalisation of this special area and its unique heritage in the coming years. For more information on how to get involved, visit http://benevena.ccght.org. 10. Thank you. Binevenagh Railway still carries thousands of passengers, locals and visitors each year. This wonderful resource, an important piece of our local, industrial and built heritage, continues to offer access to the unique landscape of Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty and holds special memories for many people. Visit www.translink.co.uk to find out how you can experience this exceptional railway journey, and see www.ccght.org for more information on Binevenagh area of outstanding natural beauty. Causeway, Coast and Glens Heritage Trust would like to thank all those who have assisted in the production of the guide and this subsequent accessible video. In particular, we thank everyone who shared their memories, stories, information and images of Binevenagh's railways. Your help and support is greatly appreciated. (11) Visitor information and our funders. For visitor information, go to discovernorthernireland.com. This video is part of Causeway, Coast and Glens Heritage Trust's ongoing work to promote the special qualities and heritage of our protected landscapes. The publication and further information can be found at ccght.org. Follow us on Facebook at Causeway, Coast and Glens Heritage Trust or Twitter at ccght. The following logos are on the screen. Causeway, Coast and Glens Heritage Trust in red with 2 ferns. Antrim Coast and Glens Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty logo illustrating cliffs by the sea. Binevenagh Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty logo featuring a building on a cliff face. Causeway Coast Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty logo featuring a duck on the coast. We are grateful to our funders who are Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs logo, Northern Ireland Environment Agency logo with the E illustrating land, sky and sea, Causeway, Coast and Glens Borough Council logo, Mid and East Antrim Borough Council logo, Tourism Northern Ireland logo with a red and white shamrock on a green background. A special thanks for supporting these videos to Department for Communities logo in English, Irish and Ulster Scots, Heritage Fund logo illustrating fingers crossed. This marks the end of this recording. Thank you.